Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean, and on this episode, we have Cubs on a roll and rolling over the St. Louis Cardinals. We have Bears making final cuts. Who were the surprises? Who were not? And why, no matter what you think of Jay Cutler, why you're wrong. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, and I want to give you a little info on the show for those of you that are new to the show or maybe are just started listening. So, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. You don't know, the Rockford Ice Hogs are the AHL minor league team for the Chicago Blackhawks. They play in beautiful BMO Harris Bank Center in Rockford, Illinois, located just 90 minutes from Chicago's city limits, and it is affordable fun for the whole family. Extremely affordable. Take your family out to a nice game. Singles games tickets and season tickets are on sale right now. The season starts just around the corner. Take your whole family, see the future Blackhawks tomorrow, today. Check them out at icehogs.com. Also, for those of you that are new to the show, we are a by the fans for the fans show. Unlike some of the sports stations that you may listen to and shows you may listen to that really get off by thinking that they're all high and mighty and that fan opinions are stupid and their opinions are better, and lying about things that they said in the past to make themselves look better and not giving you the time of day. That's not what we do. If you want to hear yourself on this show and have a question answered, just give us a ring. Give us a ring, give us a call, give us an email, a tweet, a Facebook message, whatever you want to do. Get a hold of us. And you can get a hold of us through Facebook at facebook.com/Swerski Sports. That's SWERSKI Sports. Or on Twitter at Swerski Sports or SwerskiSports.com. And we promise you'll be your question will be on the air and answered. Unless I have like 50 people asking the same question, and then I will paraphrase it. Also, if I'm ever wrong and tell you misinformation, I will tell you I was wrong. But if I was right, I will also tell you that too. Because that feels good as well. And if you enjoy this show, if you're a regular listener and you enjoy the show, please make sure you subscribe. However you listen to your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, whatever, hit subscribe. Share it with a friend. Leave us feedback. Give us 5-star reviews. Whatever you can do, the more people that do that, the better the show is going to get and the more we will grow. So with that, let's start in with our Chicago Cubs. And like I said previously, was I worried about the possibility of them not making the playoffs? No, I wasn't worried. I mean, statistically, there was a very slim chance that they were not going to make the playoffs. But whenever it is a reasonable lead, like 7 games with that many games, 30-some games left, anything is possible. And that's definitely a surmountable lead. If you were the shoes were on the other foot, roles were reversed, of course you would believe that your team had a chance. But statistics and the way the makeup is and what the schedule remaining is, the Cubs have the legitimate shot of being the ones that make it here and make it to the playoffs. And And then since that show, Cubs go and sweep Arizona and win a huge first game against Arizona, St. Louis Cardinals in St. Louis, with a win with Dan Haren pitching, 9-0, rolling. And what bodes well for this series is that you got Jason Hamill probable pitching game 2 tomorrow against Michael Wacha, and I don't know, with the way Michael Wacha's pitching, the way Jason Hamill's pitching, I don't see the Cubs winning that one, but Game 3 is going to be the pivotal one, and the Cubs have John Lester on the mound, which is nice. And then starting that 4-game series against the Philadelphia Phillies, who you really need to sweep them. They swept you last time, including a no-hitter thrown by Cole Hamels. This is a 4-game series. Cole Hamels is no longer on the team. You have no excuse for not just going in there and whooping their butts. And you start that series off on the right foot with Jake Arrieta pitching. And Arrieta is a beast. We talked about what a beast he was last time, and since then, he's thrown another quality starts. It's like 15 quality starts in a row. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know how the guy keeps, just so consistent, and it's absolutely amazing. So we're really running out of games here. We're 20-some games left in the season. They've got a bunch left against the Cardinals and a bunch against Pittsburgh, but they're starting to finally find their groove of hitting. Pitching, they're going to they got to sort that out a little bit. But when your competition is losing and you're winning, that's all that matters. Pittsburgh lost again tonight to Cincinnati. Cubs beat St. Louis. Washington lost to the Mets. The Giants did play, and they lost to Arizona 6-1. That's leaving the Cubs 8.5 games ahead of Washington, 9 games ahead of San Francisco. 9 games ahead of San Francisco. And they're a game ahead of the Dodgers if it did come down to that. So that's starting to become a more and more insurmountable lead. I mean, there's so few games left to be played. There's just 26 games left, and the magic number is down to 18. So, I mean, theoretically, the Cubs could just win 18 out of 26 and wrap this up. But Washington's going to lose a few more games in there, especially going up against the Mets. So it's looking more and more. I mean, prior to today, the magic number was 20. The Cubs gave 2 more on that today alone. It's a nice problem to have going into this being that much of a lead. What it does is allows you, if guys are a little dinged up or if they've been playing a lot, give them a couple days rest towards the end of the season. Lets you sort out your rotation, especially when with the expanded rosters, you brought Tyoshi Wada up. You've got Travis Wood, who could give you a start if you needed to in order to kind of reset your rotation, because you want, regardless of whether you throw Arrieta or Lester in a 1-game playoff series against the Pirates, you want one of those guys for that game and the other one to start game 1 of the next series if you win. So it's a situation where if you've got that big of a lead coming at the end, you've got the wiggle room to go through and throw Tyoshi Wada in there for a start, or Travis Wood in for a start, or even a CJ Edwards who made his debut today and pitched well. Give him a start. Any kind of these things, so you can line up your rotation to give yourself the best possible chance of winning. Because you always want to start off with your best guys, because if your number 1 pitcher, if Jake Arrieta starts a series, he's going to be able to play 2 games in that series at least. You'd rather have Jake Arrieta twice than Dan Haren twice, or Jason Hamill twice. It's just the way it works. So you want, if all things are perfect in a 7-game series, you want Lester to pitch twice. You want Arrieta to pitch twice. So then you just have 3 more games that you got to make up between your other guys. And having that much of a wiggle room towards the end of the season allows you to do that. And what else do the Cubs have on the horizon? They've got 2 more left in this series against against St. Louis. Then they have a 4-game stretch against the Phillies in Philadelphia, which sucks that it's this weekend because I just came back from Philadelphia this morning. So it would have been nice while I was out there to be able to catch a Cubs game in Philadelphia because it's actually a pretty nice ballpark. A day off next Monday. Then they got a 3-game set against the Pirates in Pittsburgh. And then 3 more against St. Louis in Chicago. A 3-game set against the Brewers. A 3-game set against the Pirates. A makeup game with the Royals. Then they've got 3-game set against the Reds. And a 3-game set against the Brewers. So theoretically, Reds, Brewers, at that point, you've got 6 very, very, very winnable games. Teams that are really far behind you and out of it. You hopefully can maintain that lead. That should be insurmountable at that point. And, give guys rest, give guys days off, reset your rotation, and just be ready to go and get yourself in the good mind frame. All this could change in a heartbeat, but it's really not likely. This is the way it's going to be, and you're going to see the Cardinals, Pirates, and the Cubs in the playoffs. And I think everybody would be absolutely shocked if that's not the way it worked out. I mean, statistics where, as we talked about previously, when you do Monte Carlo calculations and predictions, simulations of the remaining games that include run differential, probability, pitching probables, who you're playing, etc., etc. The postseason odds since last week, the Cubs are up at 98% of making the playoffs. So there's a 98% chance that they're going to make the playoffs. And you've got San Francisco down to 2%. So there's little chance. And Washington's at 16%, but that's basically catching up to the Mets. If you look at the wild card probability, you got 1% for San Francisco, 1% for Washington. You've got 98% for the Cubs. This is very, very, very unlikely at this point with 26 games left, having an 8.5 game lead caught up to. That's just absolutely unheard of. That's catching up more than 2 games a week. That's really difficult to do in this league, especially when you have a good team. So what else is there to say about the Cubs? We talked ad nauseum about them last week. This week, they're still on that same stretch. The nice thing about the way this team is built is they have veterans on there who are just so worried about being leaders. They're not caught up with the minutia of what's going on in a day. You've got a manager who just keeps everything loose. You've got a bunch of kids that are playing so well. And they're just going to get better. That's, Bryant's going to get better. Addison Russell's just starting to show what his potential is. Chris Bryant's going to get better. Kyle Schwarber's going to get better. These guys are all going to get better. Soler's going to get healthy. You don't even have Soler. You're playing Chris Coughlin in the outfield when he's not nearly as good as Jorge Soler as far as hitting goes. And so you're going to just continue to get better. This is supposed to be the year where the Cubs show a flash in the pan of what they're able to do, and what instead they are making a statement of who they are. They've got the best record in baseball post All-Star game, and they had a couple game losing streak to start the All-Star game. They've just been dominating baseball, and that's which with their pitching, hasn't been that great since the All-Star game. If you could combine the way that they were pitching with the way that they're just absolutely playing overall and getting timely hits of the second half of the season, this team would be steamrolling everybody. So, it's going to be a fun playoffs to watch because there's a lot of interesting teams that you don't know what you're going to see. Are you going to see the Dodgers that are, Clayton Kershaw at his best, Zach Greinke at his best, them hitting the baseball like they can? Are they going to show that potential, or are they going to be the team that plays well enough? They have the ability to go really cold. St. Louis, are they going to catch up with a bunch of no-name guys suddenly going cold, or are they going to be able to play as a team and keep that up, the production that they've had all season with the best record in baseball? Pittsburgh's team built to speed. Are you going to be able to keep guys off the path? If you do, you got a good shot of beating them. The Cubs, so young, you don't know what you're going to see. Are they going to show up and just play stupid? The Mets just have lights out pitching, but they can't hit. That bodes well in the postseason. Is minimal runs and best pitching, and they've got really good pitching. So it's going to be interesting what happens in the National League postseason playoff system. That's really it for the Cubs. I don't want to say too much. It's we talked a lot about them last week, and it's they came off of a really good sweep with a lot of power that they're showing with home runs against Arizona. We'll be able to talk more after we see the next two games against St. Louis and see what they do against Philadelphia, because if they're able to win 2 out of 3 against St. Louis Cardinals and go and win 3 out of 4 against Philadelphia, that just you could already seal it up and you can start popping the champagne corks, because they'll have won one of the wild card positions. Moving over to football, one more thing I wanted to say quickly. I'm sorry, I'm a little slow today. It's Labor Day. Blah blah blah. Last week was it last week or the week before, I talked about there was a fan poll with a good number of White Sox fans participating in the poll, and you have the vast number of people either predicting the White Sox to be in last place at the end of the year or in first place. And I said both of those are pretty silly. The White Sox, it's much more likely that they'll be in last place than first place. And looking at the way the schedule is right now, or the standings, they're 17 games out of first place with 26 games left. So your magic number is single digits. This is a team, even though Kansas City's on a 3-game losing streak, you're on a losing streak yourself. You're both 5-5 over the last 10 games. Then you can't play that way if you expect to not be in the cellar. And this is more of a, the White Sox are what they are right now. But fans need to be realistic about what it is that they have the expectations of. If you're a White Sox fan, you can't realistically think that they're going to be in first place. It's ridiculous. And if you want to think about them being in the wild card, the fact of the matter is that they are equally as close to being a wild card team as they are to being last place in the American League. I'm going to say that again, is they are just as close to being a wild card team as they are from being the worst team in the American League. So they are 6.5 games out of the wild card right now, and they are 13 games out. They're 6.5. I'm sorry. Oakland A's are the worst team in the American League, and they're 13 games out of the wild card. So that means the White Sox are 6.5 games out of the wild card and 6.5 games ahead of Oakland. So they are smack dab in the middle of being worst team in the American League and being a wild card team. So that's and not only that, they've got and they have more teams ahead of them than they do behind them. So ahead of them, Seattle's ahead of them, Tampa's ahead of them, Cleveland's ahead of them, Angels are ahead of them, Minnesota's ahead of them, and then Texas and the Yankees are the two wild card holders right at this current time. So it's silly to think that the White Sox are going to fare any better than they are. I mean, maybe they string a couple wins together and finish third in the division, but they absolutely positively can't win this division at all, even close, and they're pretty far off from being second place. Minnesota's kind of got that locked up, but they're in a series against Cleveland right now. They could beat Cleveland and surpass them and be middle of the pack. And that's all you can expect from the White Sox. And also the White Sox picked up a player that the Cubs designated for assignment in Mike Oltz. So we'll see what happens there. Does he become the third baseman of the future? The Cubs had a lot of hopes for him, and he just didn't pan out. The Rangers had a lot of hopes for him, didn't quite pan out. But a lot of people see the potential in him, so we'll see what happens there. So let's this time really move to the Bears. So when you start training camp, you have like 90 guys in your camp. Most of them are camp bodies. So you can do all your drills and you can keep fresh legs and things like that. And as you go through the preseason, you start cutting down your roster until finally this past Saturday, the Bears had to make their cuts all the way down to their 53-man roster. And I just want to go through that really quickly. And it didn't. That 53-man roster didn't stay very long, and which we knew it wouldn't. Is the Bears were a very bad team last year, and what they did is they decided that they were going to go down to their 53-man roster, and they were going to put claims in for certain players that got cut by other teams that they thought could come in and still be helpful for them. Sometimes players are cut based on salary situations where you're just not worth what that salary is, and they would rather cut you and not have to pay it, even if you could bring them some benefit and some return on an investment there. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's a numbers game. You are the fourth best running back on a team that has 3 really good running backs, and they're only going to keep 3. Doesn't mean you're bad. It just means that there's a lot of good guys ahead of you. So sometimes it's you take what other people throw away and it works out really well for you. And the Bears did stake a couple claims, and we'll talk about that in a second. So right now, the 53-man roster, and this might change by the time that the Green Bay Packers game starts on Sunday. Right now, the Bears have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, which I'm a little bit surprised by. I assumed they were going to keep 2, so that means one of 2 things. One, Jimmy Clausen's concussion is worse than they think, and they want a third person on the roster just in case. Or David Fales played well enough, and they don't think he will stick around on the practice squad, and that somebody would try to take him. So you have Jay Cutler as your starting quarterback. Jimmy Clausen and David Fales are your backups. So those are your 3 quarterbacks. You've got 4 running backs, which I figured they would keep 4. And it's interesting. There was 5 legitimate running backs that were vying for, I thought, 4 spots, and it ended up being a no competition because Sonoris Perry got hurt and was put on injured reserve, done for the season. That's it. It sort of made the competition. I feel like Kadeem Carey might not have made the roster because Sonoris Perry is a much more beneficial guy to have around on this practice squad. I mean, on the special teams. He can return kicks. He can go down and cover kicks. He's much more valuable as a special teamer than Kadeem Carey is. But you end up keeping 4 running backs. Matt Forte, obviously, it's silly to think you're not going to keep Matt Forte. He's one of the best all-around backs in the NFL. You just signed Jacquizz Rodgers. He is a good change of pace back for Matt Forte. Matt Forte is a striding runner, tall. He's not powerful at the line of scrimmage, but he's exceptional as a receiver and a blocker. Jacquizz Rodgers is, he's small but really powerfully built, and he's gonna go in there and be bowling ball like and be a real good change of pace back for Matt Forte. Jeremy Langford is your 4th round pick. That is going to be the eventual replacement for Matt Forte. Very similar in style to Matt Forte. He's just got some learning to do. The number one thing that you got to figure out in the NFL as a running back is how to pass protect, and that's going to be something he's going to have to work on. He's already shown great strides in being a special teams guy, and Jeremy Langford earned that spot on this team. And then 4th is Kadeem Carey. He didn't play bad, but I don't know if he would have beat out Sonoris Perry, just because Sonoris Perry is much more versatile. But Kadeem Carey wins the spot on this roster. But if the Bears do make a roster move and they need to make some space, don't be surprised if Kadeem Carey does get cut. That's a candidate right there. 6 wide receivers they kept, which I'm not surprised by at all. Alshon Jeffrey, Eddie Royal, Marquise Wilson, Mark Mariani. Those were the ones that, easy peasy make that decision because Mark Mariani is your kick returner. And then the other 3 are your top 3. Then they kept Josh Bellamy, who spent some time with Washington, Kansas City, and he appeared in 4 games for the Bears last year. He played pretty well in the preseason. And then you have Cameron Meredith, who undrafted free agent out of ISU, and the big 6'3" wide receiver. He played really well in the preseason, so it was really nice to see. I figured he was a candidate for the practice squad, but they must have thought that he could be much more useful there than in the practice squad, or that somebody was going to take him. So they keep Cameron Meredith. Kept 3 tight ends, and this was one where I didn't know if they were going to keep 4 tight ends or not. I figured they might keep 2 quarterbacks and 4 tight ends, but they ended up keeping 3. Got rid of Dante Rosario, who's been here for several years now, but he was so worthless and he was a penalty machine. I knew his time was coming, but they ended up keeping Martellus Bennett, which he led all NFL tight ends with 90 receptions last year. You can't get rid of Martellus Bennett because he's a valuable cog that you have on your offense. They keep Zach Miller, who, if he is healthy, he's going to be a heck of a weapon for the Bears, as long as they utilize him properly and he stays healthy. And then they traded they sent a future 6th-round pick to Texas for Kari Lee. And he's a guy who has got a lot of upside, and he's big, and he's a blocker. And that tells me a couple things. Is one, that they're going to utilize an extra tight end in the blocking scheme, and that they are still a little concerned about their starting offensive line. So that's why you bring a Kari Lee in. Offensive line, they've got 8. Kyle Long is obviously there. Jermon Bushrod, Will Montgomery, Matt Slauson. They kept Charles Leno, even though he wasn't that good, but they kept him. Vladimir Dukas, Hronis Grasu, and then somebody that they claimed off of waivers was Patrick Omame, who started all 16 games at right guard last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is not saying much because they were a bad team. Bad team. That's why they got the first pick. But he does have experience. And this means that there's one name on there that I didn't say on this final roster, and that's Jordan Mills. Jordan Mills got cut. And that screams volumes to me. And I don't know if you are thinking the same thing, but for me, it sounds exactly like they're starting right tackle from last year, and then the guy who was competing with him who didn't play well, they got rid of one, and the other one is still there. I think this means that they are going to kick Kyle Long out to right tackle and move, for the time being, Vladimir Dukas over at right guard, and then, depending on how he plays, potentially replace him with Patrick Omame, and see how that goes. Because you need, if you're going to be a run-first offense and be productive and give these guys an opportunity to make some big plays, you need an offensive line that's going to be something that you can work with, and you can't have a weak link, and that right tackle spot was by far a weak link. Do I think Will Montgomery is the best center in football? No. Is Jermon Bushrod fully healthy? No. But you do have a beast in Matt Slauson, and you do have a beast in Kyle Long, and you just need to get a fifth serviceable guy out there, and I think Vladimir Dukas is somebody that's serviceable, and especially when you can mask him at that guard position. I mean, he's a kind of a road grader guy, so you can move him to guard and really do a power run behind him. So nothing has been confirmed by the Bears, but I'm shocked if you don't see Kyle Long playing right tackle for the Bears against Green Bay Packers. Otherwise, you're just basically telling Jay Cutler, F you, we want you to get hurt or play bad. Defensive line. We are moving to the defense. This was a little bit surprising, not based on the who, but the how many. Ego Ferguson made the squad, and he has played better than I expected him to, but he's sort of built to be this 3-4 defensive end. It seems like a very fitting position for him. Jarvis Jenkins he's going to be the other 3-4 defensive end. And he's kind of the senior member of the defensive line right now until Jeremiah Ratliff comes back from suspension. Jeremiah Ratliff is not currently on the 53-man roster. He is on the injured, suspended list. So when he comes back for Game 4, they're going to have to make a roster move to make room for him. So look for maybe a quarterback to get moved or a running back to get moved. But it's not like they have an extra defensive lineman that they're going to get rid of to make room for Jeremiah Ratliff. They kept Eddie Goldman clearly because he, aside from that concussion, is going to be the nose tackle, and he's just going to be a beast there, I think. Will Sutton. I was very worried what Will Sutton would do because I like Will Sutton. I loved him coming out of college, and he's a 3 technique type of guy. But I thought he had the possibility of being able to play well on that 3-4 just because he still is a stout guy and he can use that quickness. And Will Sutton was a bright spot in the camp. I think that everybody came in there assuming that he wasn't going to make it, and everybody was proved wrong by Will Sutton. And then you have Cornelius Washington, who played in 3-4 defense in college at Georgia, and he has value on special teams, and he's just going to fill a rotation spot until you get Jeremiah Ratliff back. Your linebackers. Jared Allen is going to be one of your starting outside linebackers, along with Pernell McPhee, who clearly is probably your best outside linebacker. Your starting middle linebacker is going to be Shea McClellan, Christian Jones. It's nice to see Christian Jones there because he worked so hard, and I think he really deserved it. And Shea McClellan is still an enigma. He'll have some great plays as middle linebacker, and then he'll have some busts. And the Bears got rid of Mason Foster, which is a little bit shocking because I felt like he had some probably the most speed out of the middle linebackers, and that's something that you're really lacking. So, I don't understand why they got rid of him. Granted, you had some good play from undrafted rookies, but Mason Foster is a guy is a veteran, and he's still one of your fastest linebackers. Lamar Houston. Lamar Houston is making this team, and which is nice to see him because he looked great in the preseason, and he really bounced back from that torn ACL. Sam Acho, he didn't do much in the preseason because he had an illness, and that derailed his performance a little bit. But he's kind of a max effort guy, and you're gonna love seeing him play during the regular season. John Bostic, he's a surprise to make the team, I think, because he's been down so much. I don't really know what they expect to get out of him. I figured he would be gone and Mason Foster would have made the team. And then John Timu makes the team. Undrafted rookie out of Washington. And if you guys remember, if you've been listening for a while, my favorite part of the year is the NFL draft, and I break down a lot of players. And I broke down John Timu at linebacker, and what I said was he's a really talented guy on a really talented defense. The problem is he's not fast, and he doesn't have a lot of straight line speed, and he doesn't play that fast. But to be fair, Ray Lewis wasn't that fast either. So John Timu comes in and he plays really well. He played hard. He picked up well what the coaching staff was trying to teach him, and figured out the defense really quickly, and made up the most for not being fleet of foot. And it's nice to see John Timu make that roster, and it won't be long before John Timu probably takes Shea McClellan's spot, and you have two undrafted rookies as your starting middle linebackers, and that's not necessarily that bad of a thing because they both played really well. And then Willie Young, who I was really excited to see make the Bears roster because I like Willie Young a lot. He led the Bears with 10 sacks last year, and he's going to be an outside linebacker for the first time in his career, coming off of the torn Achilles. And Willie Young, he's another guy that I figured would be a casualty of the defensive scheme switch, and he ended up making it as well. The Bears kept 7 cornerbacks. Kyle Fuller, clearly. Alan Ball, who's going to be your other starter. And he's part of the reason that Tim Jennings is gone is Alan Ball is much cheaper. Alan Ball is much bigger at 6'2", and he's much more physical and made for the press coverage that you got to run in the Fangio's 4-3 defense. I mean, a 3-4 defense. So Alan Ball much better. Terrence Mitchell, he played really well in the preseason, so it's not surprising that he made the roster. And Sherrick McManus, who really made leaps and strides, improvements over last year. And I always thought Sherrick McManus had the potential to be much better than he was. And it's nice to see with a real defensive coordinator that he is starting to shine. Demontre Hurst made it, which is nice to see. I like Demontre Hurst. And Tracy Porter. The Bears really like Porter's experience, and even though he's been banged up in the preseason, he's a veteran presence that they like to have around. And then they kept, undrafted rookie Bryce Callahan to be one of their seven cornerbacks, which is really shocking. And then you go to the safeties. Antrell Roll, who was their big free agent signing, he's going to be one of your starters. Adrian Amos, the 5th-round pick out of Penn State, beat out Brock Farine for the starting free safety job, and I thought he looked pretty good. Brock Farine had looked much better this year than last year, but he still hasn't made that final leap. But I think during the course of the season, he's going to get much better. And then the Bears, they placed Ryan Mundy on injured reserve because of a hip injury, and they claimed on waivers and got Harold Jones Cordy, an undrafted rookie out of Division II Findlay, to be one of the 4 safeties the Bears keep on the roster. So this is a little bit scary. This is where the scariness comes in, because if the Bears' defensive front is not able to get pressure, you've got Alan Ball, who's a journeyman cornerback, and Kyle Fuller, who's had a great first half of his rookie year, but a subpar second half, who's your other starter, and then a lot of inexperience at the cornerback spot. And then at their safety spot, 3/4 of your safeties, have a combined 1 year of NFL experience. And Antrell Roll is a 3-time Pro Bowler, but he's a little long in the tooth. So you've got long in the tooth guy, 5th-round draft pick, undrafted rookie, and a guy who made 5 starts in his NFL career. That's a little bit scary. These guys better step up and put on their big boy pants. And then finally the specialists, no big surprises there because there was no competition for most of them. Robbie Gould, no competition, made it. Pat O'Donnell, no competition, made it. And then Thomas Gafford joined the Bears after appearing in 105 straight games for the Chiefs, and he was clearly the guy who was going to get the long snapper's position. And then after the Bears made their cuts, there was some fan favorites that didn't make it that ended up coming back and being put on the practice squad. So now that the Bears have their final 53-man roster finalized, they got their 10-man practice squad completely designated. So you've got linebacker James Anderson, who's another young rookie who played very well and earned a spot. Linebacker Lamon Barrow, offensive tackle Nick Becton, Brandon Dunn, the defensive lineman, who really impressed during the preseason. Jacoby Glenn, the cornerback. Paul Lasky, the running back. Jalen Saunders, wide receiver. Gannon Sinclair, the tight end, another tight end. Ife Amodu, who was the guy who blocked the punt and caught a nice touchdown pass and does the yoga pose after he scores. He made the practice squad. And then the Swamp Monster Terry Williams, the defensive lineman. Those are going to be your practice squad guys. So look for some of those guys to eventually come up because there's going to be the Bears know that they don't have postseason aspiration with this team. So what this year is to improve, show that you're getting better, build a better foundation for a team, figure out who can play and who can't, because you're going to, if you can't play, you're out, and they're going to bring somebody else in there to try it out, because this is not the Green Bay Packers where they have Super Bowl aspirations. This is a team that's building and learning and growing, and what you're going to do is you're going to play those guys, and if they can't play, you're going to see who can. One last thing I wanted to say is that during the week, a reporter asked Mike McCarthy, the head coach of the Green Bay Packers, what's going to happen when they play the Bears on the first game of the season this coming Sunday. And he said he's going to kick the Bears' ass. And the rest of the media world, especially Chicago media, they were expecting this to be a big thing and a rivalry coming out already in the first week of the season, and there was going to be shots fired back. And they looked for a quote from John Fox, and he's like, I watched the tape from last year, meaning the tape of the Bears games against Green Bay last year. And he said they got a reason to be optimistic. He knows that they're a much better team than the Bears, but you play the game because you don't know. He's not taking the bait. Mike McCarthy can say what he wants because they're clearly the far superior team. I can't remember the last time the Green Bay lost a game in Chicago to the Bears. And to be honest, the Packers won like 11 of the last 13 games against the Bears. It's been really a lopsided and brutal thing. The Bears for a couple years during the last Favre years had a little bit of a good luck streak against the Green Bay, but that's been about it. Since then, it's been just as bad as the early years of Favre there. It's just they really have the Bears number. So, let them talk until the Bears can go out there and prove that they're worthy of staying in the same stadium and playing on the same field as the Green Bay Packers have room to shoot their mouths off. And then finally, or before I get to my last point, I just want to say, going back to my evaluations of players from the NCAA coming into the NFL, there's a few players that got drafted pretty high that I boggled my mind why anybody thought that they should have gone that high. And two recent picks were Lewis Nix, the defensive lineman out of Notre Dame. A lot of people were like, oh, he's going to be a beast and he's going to do this and that. He's already got cut. He got cut by the Texans, and he just hasn't showed anything. Didn't show anything his rookie year. Didn't show enough to even stay on the team. Lewis Nix, I called that one. And then Stanley Jean-Baptiste, the big, tall cornerback out of Nebraska. He got drafted with a second-round pick and has already been cut. So, again, he was a guy, I watched him play. Other than the fact that he's tall, a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, he's so tall. He's going to be a great cornerback. He's going to be able to do all these things and cover these big receivers. But if you watched him play, he can't play cornerback. He's stiff in his feet. He can't move his hips right. He's nothing. If he wasn't 6 foot, whatever he is, he would be absolutely nothing. The only advantage, the only positive he has is that he's a little bit tall for a cornerback. So it's nice to be proven right on those situations again. Makes me feel good. And finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is why you are wrong about Jay Cutler. And I'm talking to you specifically, the person who's listening. And if you're looking and going, is he talking about me? Yeah, I'm talking about you. So you hear so many rants and raves about Jay Cutler. Oh, Jay Cutler's the worst. He's the worst quarterback in the league. And why couldn't we get anybody else but Jay Cutler? And the fact is that you couldn't get anybody better than Jay Cutler. You could not. The elite quarterbacks aren't going anywhere. The only time elite quarterbacks go up for availability are after injuries when you don't know what's going to happen. Like when Drew Brees left San Diego and went to New Orleans, he had a shoulder issue that was a very, very big concern. And I remember thinking back when that happened, a lot of people were saying the Bears should have gone after Drew Brees. But I said, I'm really worried about that shoulder, and I'm not a physician, not an orthopedic surgeon, and I didn't evaluate him, but I saw enough of that arm to be questionable. And that was a case where the Saints felt comfortable. They paid him the money, and he was well worth it. The other one is Peyton Manning. Peyton came off of just a terrible neck injury, and people were wondering if he was ever going to play again. And he lost a lot of velocity on his ball that he didn't even have in the first place. So physically, he's not a gifted quarterback, but he's just so smart, and he's still able to get the ball in there. He's able to do enough. But awesome quarterbacks just don't come around. Sometimes you can develop one if you have a good system in place. Sometimes you are able to luck out, or sometimes you're able to get one in the draft, but they don't come around that often, and it's a little bit difficult. This was a really bad quarterback draft year, so you didn't want to go ahead and draft somebody and hope that they're going to be your starter, because that's not going to happen. I mean, Mariota and Winston were your top two guys, and I don't fully buy into either of them yet. Josh McCown was a flash in the pan for one half of a season. He sucked after he left the Bears in Tampa. I mean, do you remember the Tampa Bay article when the Bears played Tampa? It was the front page of the sports section in the Tampa newspaper. It was like, can you take him back? Because he was terrible. And he's terrible now in Cleveland. And he was terrible before he came to the Bears. He had one good half season. He was not the answer. So who was going to play your quarterback position? Jimmy Clausen? He's worse than what you've had before. Jimmy Clausen is not good. And you don't know what you have in David Fales. So that's where you're at. So first of all is you need to have a reality check and think and say, Jay Cutler was the absolute best quarterback you could get for this team at this year. And if they thought they could have better, they would have done it. Last season, Jay Cutler threw for 28 touchdowns. That's the second most number of touchdowns that any Bears quarterback has thrown in a single season ever. Bears are one of the oldest teams in the NFL, and that was the second highest number of touchdowns any quarterback has thrown in a single season. And Jay Cutler was sacked 38 times last year, second highest sack total of his career. And I know it's going to be a little hard to understand this, is that last year you can't blame the defense solely for what the offense did, but it makes it a little bit hard out there. Is if you're a quarterback and you're always playing from behind, you have to, especially when you're playing behind by a lot of points, you're going to have to throw the ball a lot to try to get back in the game, especially when you don't have a good offensive line and good enough to run the ball. You have to start making a lot of passes. And that's what happened to Jay Cutler, is the Bears defense was so bad, the offense felt a lot of pressure to try to go out there and score, and it just it didn't bode well for the Bears. The defense was so awful last year. Jay Cutler had to throw 256 passes when trailing in a game. 106 of those passes were when they were trailing by 9 points or more. To put that into perspective, Russell Wilson, Seattle's quarterback, threw 54 passes while trailing by 9 or more points, and that includes the postseason. So that's a factor that you have to include when you're evaluating Jay Cutler. That he's throwing so many passes from behind that you sort of have to be aggressive. When you're aggressive, you don't always make the best choices, or it doesn't always go your way. And then you have to consider that, people say, well, he threw a lot of first quarter picks for the Bears. In all the games he played last year, he threw 3 picks in the first quarter of all the games combined. 3. That's it. I mean, a lot of other quarterbacks, including Luck and Manning and Brady, they threw, I don't know about Brady, but Luck and Manning threw at least or more than 3 in the first quarter. So that's just saying is that Jay Cutler, most of his interceptions are coming late in the game. And it's when it's the most apparent, because that's when you're losing. But that's the most understanding time, is because you are already behind because your defense is so bad. And you have to go out there and try to score as many points as possible and try to force things. When you have a better defense, what you're able to do is, if you don't have anything, you don't force it, you punt the ball, you get better field position, hope your defense makes a hold to get the field position back, and then have a second crack at it. But when your defense is giving up 90-yard drive here, an 80-yard drive here, and a 70-yard drive here for touchdowns, you have to start moving the ball. And, there was already dysfunction in the locker room with Brandon Marshall feud with Jay Cutler and Martellus Bennett throwing a fit, and a coach that lost the locker room. It's a tough situation to be in when you're when you're a starting quarterback. And then you put in the mix that Coach Trestman was just lost the offense, and Jay Cutler felt that he was going to get killed and the Bears were going to lose if he kept playing the plays that are being called by Trestman. So he sort of went rogue and audibled out of things and tried to run it himself. And that's never the way to go, unless you are a player like Joe Montana or Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, who just know your system so well that you can run in your sleep and be able to win. Jay Cutler's got to be a guy that plays within a system and plays for a strong head coach and buys into that system. So that's why you're wrong about hating Jay Cutler. Is he's a very talented guy, and there's a lot of circumstances of why he hasn't played well. And you have to be understanding of those. And you can't say, well, they're just excuses. Is because there is a reality that this is a team sport, and you are put into positions of players running wrong routes because a lot of the offensive players last year didn't know what they were doing. and they're running wrong routes. So Cutler is throwing timing routes where you have to throw before the guy gets there. Now think about this. It's almost like throwing blind. Is you're throwing to a spot. And so you drop back. You know how long it takes you to drop back in coverage. You know as soon as you hit to a spot, you release the ball and you throw to another spot. And you expect your receivers are going to be there to catch the ball because that's how you practice it. And if they run the wrong route, or they get bumped at the line of scrimmage and can't get off the line, or whatever the case may be, if they're not in that spot, that makes you look really bad as a quarterback. And sometimes it's hard to know if your quarterback just screwed up and thought that the pattern was supposed to be different. But based on some of the reactions on the going off the sideline, it was clearly the wide receiver that had been running wrong routes. And then, like I said, that's the reason why if you hate Jay Cutler, you're wrong. Now, if you're one of the Jay Cutler supporters, here's why you're wrong. The guy has played for 4 head coaches already. He's a coach killer. Shanahan, Lovie Smith, Mark Trestman, now on to John Fox. He's gone through 6 offensive coordinators. Rick Dennison, Ron Turner, Mike Martz, Mike Tice, Aaron Kromer, and now Adam Gase. 6 offensive coordinators. He's got a career 85 quarterback rating. He's tied with Andy Dalton for the 25th best in NFL history. That's lower than notable quarterbacks such as Jeff Garcia, Dante Culpepper, and David Garrard. It's bad. He's getting paid close to $20 million a season. I mean, that's the 9th highest salary in the NFL for 2015. He's got 1 career playoff win, and that was a 2010 divisional playoff game against Seattle, who wasn't even that good that year. And he's only got 1 career win versus the Green Bay Packers. He's faced the Green Bay Packers 11 times in his career, and he's won once. And he's led the NFL in interceptions twice. I think the only other active quarterback that's done that is maybe Eli Manning. So, I mean, I completely understand why if you are a guy that loves Jay Cutler, those are things that you have to answer. And like I said before, there's reasons why he could be a very good quarterback. Let me go back. There's reasons why sometimes you can't always blame him for everything that happens. But then there's also that Jay Cutler is a guy that will go rogue, and he will try to force balls, and he will try to play outside the system, and he doesn't have good mechanics, and he's going to make dumb mistakes. But, so you have to take the good with the bad, and that's what they're doing. So if you're a guy that absolutely hates Jay Cutler, you don't have a reason to. I mean, he's not Aaron Rodgers, he's not Tom Brady, but he's a lot better than a lot of other quarterbacks in the league. When you have an NFL-style offense with a quality head coach, and offensive coordinator there, he's going to be a much better player. But you also can't buy the Kool-Aid on him because he's done so many boneheaded things for such a long time in his career that you can't count on him. But the fact remains is that he is the Bears quarterback. He's the best option the Bears have as a quarterback. And he's also, by far and away, the best quarterback the Chicago Bears have ever had. By far and away. There is no other quarterback in Chicago Bears history that you can say is as good as Jay Cutler. And people have been, well, Sid Luckman was a better quarterback. How many of you watched Sid Luckman play? The answer is probably none. None of you watched Sid Luckman play. You just heard that name and he sounds old, so he's probably great. But, I mean, let's talk about single season passing numbers for the Bears. Completions. Jay Cutler has the most completions in an NFL season for the Chicago Bears all time. So for all time Chicago Bears single season completions, he has 370, and that was last year. So last year, when you were like, Jay Cutler's the worst quarterback ever, he completed 370 passes, which beats him by 34 passes over the second best season, which was Jay Cutler in 2009. Third place is Eric Kramer, which he beat by 20% off of, that record-breaking season 95. It's 100 more completions than Jim Harbaugh. Another 100 over Eric Kramer's second best season. Then you go to Kyle Orton, Rex Grossman, and then it's Jay Cutler. So in Jay Cutler's career here, and he's got, other than 2011, is every year Jay Cutler has had completions that put him in the top 10 completions per season in Bears history. Let's go for yards in a season. Eric Kramer has the Bears record for most yards in a season at 38. Jay Cutler is 26 yards shy of that last year. So last year when everyone was like, Jay Cutler is the worst quarterback ever, he was one decent completion away from being the all-time single-season Bears passing leader. And he'll probably get that this year. He's also has, if you look at the top 5 Bears single-season yardage, it's Eric Kramer number 1, Jay Cutler number 2, 3, and 4, and then Rex Grossman number 5. Sid Luckman's 11. Jay Cutler last year passed for 1,100 more yards than Sid Luckman's best season ever. Then touchdowns in a season is that 1995 season. Eric Kramer threw for 29 touchdown passes, which is the single season all-time best for the Bears. Last year, when everyone said, Jay Cutler sucks, he's the worst quarterback ever, he threw for 28 touchdowns. 28 touchdowns. And your boy Sid Luckman, he has you want to say, Jay Cutler throws so many interceptions, terrible. Sid Luckman has the Bears' all-time single-season interception. It is 31 interceptions in 12 games. 31 interceptions in 12 games. Last year, when you all said that Jay Cutler sucked, I don't even know he wasn't even up there. 2009 was Jay Cutler's most interceptions. That was 26. And then let's look at all-time for career passer numbers. Is for completions, number 1, Jay Cutler. Number 2, Jim Harbaugh. 3, Eric Kramer. 4, Sid Luckman. Sid Luckman played from 1939 to 1950, and Jay Cutler has twice as many completions as him, and he only played 2009 to 2000 to the start of this year. So Jay Cutler is the all-time completions holder for the Bears. All-time yardage, Jay Cutler, 18,725 yards. Sid Luckman, 14,000 and change. So he's got 3,300 more yards and half the number of seasons as Sid Luckman. And then all-time touchdown passes, that's Sid Luckman right now. But Jay Cutler is only 8 touchdowns shy. So this season, Jay Cutler will pass that in way less games. So you could say a lot of things, but Sid Luckman is not better than Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler, for better or worse, is the best quarterback that this team has ever had. And that's really sad because he's a turnover machine. Between his fumbles and his poor decision making. And another thing is, you can hate the guy for his off-the-field demeanor, but you crucified the guy when he screams at teammates. When he screamed at Jamarcus Webb for nearly getting him killed, you were like, poor Jamarcus Webb, the bad bully picked on him. But then if he doesn't say anything and he sits on the sideline quiet, then you're like, well, he's a powder, he's a crybaby, he doesn't care about anything, he's smoking Jay Cutler. But then, what do you see him doing now on the sidelines? He's pointing out to David Fales what he's, what he saw on the film and things like that, and on the pictures from the sideline, he's being a good teammate. You know, Tom Brady, when he goes and screams at people, you're like, he's fiery. But when Jay Cutler does it, he's a bully. So people don't give him a fair shake, and I like to look at the exact evidence I have of the guy, and I realize he's the absolute best quarterback we can have on the team right now. There's nobody else we can get that's better, but he still has a lot of room for improvement, and he's played a long time in this league, and it's not likely that he's going to get infinitely better. But as long as he can cut down on the turnovers and the Bears defense can perform better, the offense is going to be much more productive than it was last year, which is something the Bears need. So that's going to do it for this episode of the show. Next week we'll have much more as far as the NFL, because we'll have one game under our belt. We'll be able to talk about the Bears, Packers, and the results, and hopefully the Bears are 1-0 at that point. And if not, at least I hope they didn't get bulldozed like they did last season. So thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure you keep checking us out and subscribe. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down